Regional President, Prof. Forum. As I said, we also have in our midst the Director of Research, NDC. We want to acknowledge you. So I'll pause here and come back and introduce more of our dignitaries. As we said, if you are here and you have not been acknowledged, we would do that from time to time. Thank you very much. And I wish all of us a very fruitful deliberation as the program continues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benedict, sir. And please, may we all be upstanding as we welcome His Excellency Thank you very much. Thank you for your endurance. And thank you, Benedicta, for the long introduction. There are some people here who will also introduce us and when they come in. This program is being organized. Can I wait for the picture opportunities for JM before we start? Hey, you. Can we now start the program? Cameraman and woman. Thank you very much. I know you've captured what you need to capture. For your story, can we start? Can we now take your seats, camera persons, if I will put it that way? Cameraman, is that okay? Thank you. Wow. This program is now called to order. There are some few people who are introduced here today. Others will be duly acknowledged and introduced. Because I can see the heavyweights have joined us. And the program will start now. The chairman for today's program we go straight to the program. We have to read the CV, and he doesn't want that. But the last part I'll add is that he taught effectively at the KNUST Department of Mathematics for 6 years. Mathematics? 6 years. He lectured at the Institute of Distance Learning, KNUST, as a facilitator. Lord has attended and presented many international conferences, including World Finance. Accept, or we just forcing this on you. He's best suited to do that job. And he will come in and tell us why we are here today And after that, Chairman, then I'll call you to accept, because you should know why we are here, who we are. We are nice people. We are nice people. Who we are, and after that, the program begins. So on this note, I'll call the president of the Professional Forum, Ambassador Sampiali, to come and tell us why we are here today. And he has promised that it will be very brief. And I know when it's brief, it's very, very brief. Then, added to his work, he introduced those who are seated in front, and the rest that we didn't introduce. Put your hands together as I welcome my boss.
Thank you, Secretary General Jehu Appiah. First of all, I would like to thank all of you for making this program a priority in this cold Monday morning. I'm excited to inform you that this day is being organized jointly by the NDC Professionals Forum and the Center for Ethical Governance and Administration. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to welcome and appreciate the following personalities. Lord has been already introduced, but let me add that he is the freshest professor in academia. Just be. Your Excellency, John Dramani Mahama, the former President of the Republic of Ghana, we are so thankful for accepting to be our Chief Guest of Honor, and most importantly, Your Excellency, permitting us to put your record of economic management under academic scrutiny and criticism this morning. Let me welcome, most especially, my dear brother and friend, Dr. Samuel Ofosu Ampofo, the National Chairman of the National Democratic Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, let me welcome the pride of Ekitechi, the Queen Mother of Ekitechi, that is commended in Naigwafu traditional area, Nana Jane Opogwajiman. His Excellency Professor Dansun Boafu, former High Commissioner of Ghana to England. Prof. And of course, the former Minister for Finance and Economic Planning, Mr. Seth Tekpe. By way of brief introduction, and I was going to introduce this man as the chairman of the advisory board of the Professional Forum. But let me first introduce him as the former chief of staff, Obatan, Nana Atodazi. By way of brief introduction. Okay. The NDC Professional Forum is a registered center-left professional organization. Our membership consists of doctors, pharmacists, and allied health professionals, lawyers, engineers, university professors and lecturers, and other members of the knowledge industry. We have accountants, auditors, bankers, diplomats, security experts, information communication experts, trade unionists, teachers, nurses, researchers, economics, amongst others. As a public think tank, we seek to serve the society with researched and balanced information on national issues. We serve as advocates for social equity and justice. We offer community health services. And we also offer, sometimes we offer legal services to the poor and the needy. We create platforms and bring together some of the best brains in the country to discuss issues of national concern with a view of influencing national policy. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we support youth and women empowerment. And being social democratic organization, we are naturally allied to the NDC and other social democratic institutions in Ghana. We support the party with our expertise, experience, and resources in the NDC's quest to deepen social democracy and ethical governance in Ghana. Let me at this stage introduce and welcome the following arrowheads that drive the NDC Professional Forum. You have your Dr. Ebo Jihuapia. He was the former General Secretary of the Ghana Medical Association. He's our Secretary General. Professor Colin Stephen Aholu, if he's here, Director of Operations. Minister Eric Burton Huajato, Director of Money. He's Director of Finance. We have Dr. Vida Yakon, who is in charge of the Young Professionals Forum. That's our successor organization. We have Dr. Yajira Mensah, Deputy General Secretary, Admin. Even K. Hodo, the money man, Deputy General Secretary, Operations. We have Fifi Bachman, Director, Legal. Nana Ama Blancruche, in charge of Women and Youth. The Chairman, we have to announce that we have chapters across the length and breadth of the country because we believe that our services are needed across. So we have the regional presidents here, notably the regional president from the central region, Kakrayale, if you are here, let's recognize you. Then we have Arnold Kojo Edu Apia, he's the Director of International Affairs, Conrad Dombe, who is responsible for Europe and United Kingdom. And of course, Ambassador Sampiyali, your humble servant, as the president. I'm happy to announce that we have been collaborating very, very effectively with our sister organization, the Center for Ethical Governance and Administration. Professor Ohin Ejei is the president, executive director. Dr. Jerry Monfort, head of economics. Justice Moses Aheto, executive secretary of SEGA. Lawyer Cosmos is the director of legal services. George Yanka is a bit indisposed, so he's not here. We are very grateful for all of you for attending, but especially the National Youth Organizer for the support he has given us in organizing this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, over the years, there have been so many issues raised about the economy of this country. Beside the cacophony of social media and party communicators, we who are in academia, who are in the professional world, have a role to play in explaining with facts and figures. So that by the end of the today, based on the presentation we are going to have from no other person than the former Minister of Finance, and the questions that inputs you would deliver, it's our belief and hope that we should have ended with a scorecard so that every Ghanaian will know what the real issues are. We're going to separate the myth from the perceptions and give you real facts and figures. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the NDC Professionals Forum and SEGA, we welcome you all to this function. We hope the next time when we are doing one, you will find time to attend. Mr. Kofi Atto has been recognized as an advisor, but let me say that he's also representing the speaker. Thank you very, very much. Mr. Slamensa is here. Mr. Slamensa, you're welcome. Honorable Fosukwachi, you are here, you are welcome. Mr. Richard Courier, who is the former director of prisons, and head of our security. Moses Asaga, head of our energy policy. And of course, Ambassador Victor Smith. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the Ambassador, our President. When you were introducing, you said we were in all the regions of this country. Sadly to say that we lost one of the presidents, of the president for the Western region, Honorable Alfred Jan. We call him Abbott. Just last week, some few days ago. May we please be upstanding for a brief second or a minute? He would have been here. Abbott would have been here. May the soul of Abbott and all departed rest in peace. Amen. It's very difficult to say this about my friend Abbott. He has a name for everybody. But the program has to continue. On this note, I'll call the chairman for this program to either accept or run away from us. You accept. Okay, so on this note, please take the mic and introduce and tell us why you have accepted this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all dignitaries gathered here and all those present. When I got the call to be a chairman for this forum, in fact, there was a mixed feeling, but I said, let me go and check the background of ProForum. So I did a bit of investigations and got to know more about ProForum and what they stand for. But then I also asked them, what kind of topic are we going to discuss? Because when we talk about economy is huge with different sectors and all those. Then they came up with a simple title called The Scorecard. So my question was, what are we going to score on a card? You know, this is very, very important. And for a program being on an economy, I have no choice than to accept, but then put in some few words. I think if you look at our economy and the happenings on the grounds, yesterday evening, my wife went to buy a gas cylinder, for our domestic consumption, just to bring the economy to your house. And then, you know, I asked her of the price, and she said the price is 150 Ghana cedis for the 17 cubic kg type of cylinder. Then I thought we used to buy this somewhere 90 Ghana cedis last year, early last year. But inflation is single digit. So, how do we relate this to, you know, price going up by almost a half and then inflation being in a single digit? I found it difficult. Then I asked further discussions. I called my good friend, Dr. Kobe Mensah. So do you remember the statement the finance minister made? The senior minister made some time ago on why the banks are not responding to the downwards, trend in the interest rate structures we have in the economy. Then I said, okay, fine. It could be that the banks might not have money. Liquidity is a problem. But then on the other hand, let's also think through whether the banks trust the interest rate numbers that are coming out. So, you could see there's kind of a missing link between the various economic indicators that are being churned out from the strong room of economic management and then what is happening on the grounds. Because if you mention that interest rate is coming down, GDP is growing, for economics we call something lead indicators. And for GDP to grow, I expect that businesses will start spending. I expect that people will start requesting for loans, comfortably and run on business. And as a result of that, they will be what? Employing, But this is the reality. So you see government doing all the employment. So when I got a call and I got to know that it is the former finance minister who is coming to, tell us what is really happening on the ground, a different perspective. And that is the beauty of democracy. We are fortunate Ghana has gone through, several hands since 1992. When we started growing up. And so, having a former finance minister, I said, let me come and then be the chairman for this program. Maybe I'll get to know more. So, Ambassador, I have no choice than to accept, what is coming.
Thank you very much for accepting. And I've just been notified that there are a lot more people here who have not been introduced. And when we were introducing, the ambassador mentioned, our president mentioned, the Central Regional President. We also have the Greater Accra President for Proforum. Professor Nete, you are here. I was once at a wedding in Abuja, Nigeria, with my wife. And almost everybody there was introduced. So I asked, why do you introduce everybody? They said, if you don't introduce, they take their gifts back home. My wife and I were not introduced. So the person overheard me saying that. So he went to tell the guy who was doing the introduction. You know what he said? I said, because of the importance of this meeting, I've flown in a doctor from Ghana to come and be at this meeting. And always they say that Ghana is a gateway to Africa. But I want him to know, if Ghana is a gateway, Nigeria is the destination. On this note, I think that I shouldn't waste more time. I'll call in the person who has already been introduced. Honorable Setepe, are you ready? You're doing PowerPoint. If you're doing PowerPoint, then you have to change the architecture on the stage. Please put your hands together as you welcome the former Minister for Finance, Honorable Setepe, to take us through why we are here. There's a sanitizer here. And also, let me remind you that COVID is still real. My friend who is gone died because of COVID. Please, sanitizing, your face masks, social distancing is very important. Let's abide by that as we go through this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Your Excellency, former running mates, my esteemed colleague, Honorable Chair, and I think almost every year has been introduced, and therefore let me just acknowledge you all to this function. What we have I would take the PowerPoint approach because as has been said, we would like to use some numbers, and let me explain that the numbers we are using, unless we say so, are official numbers. They are the government's numbers by governments, and I mean the NDC or His Excellency President Mahama, and in some instances Professor Mercy's numbers. Secondly, we start from 2013 for the simple reason that for many discussions, we have had 3 rebasings, we have had impact of oil and the rest. And so the current basis for the economy is 2013, which also happened to be a period which is very important for the NDC. And therefore, most of the analysis will start from 2013, which is important because we have also now had a full 4 years going into 2020. So it is significant that we are able to do some comparison and also resolve some issues which, has often been mentioned in relation to our performance. So let me begin with the first point. And I thought we would have a wider screen. But if you can, we want to state emphatically that there was little or no consolidation from 2016, as has been claimed. And let me explain. If you just focus on the yellow spots that we have, you will see that the year is 2016, and there was an expenditure level which is indicated, and then we do have a revenue level and an expenditure level. And you will see a figure standing on its own. It has no precedent, it has no antecedent. And as somebody who started my career within the PNDC era, I can assure you that you can go to the 1980s and you would never see that figure. This is very important for us because you would have heard over the last 8 years that we left a deficit of 10.3%, 9%, 8%. We just want to say that we did not leave that level of deficit. Let me emphasize, we did not leave that level of deficit. And I think it's important that our administration, our communicators and others get this very clear. So what you have there is a figure of 5 billion standing on its own. And what was done is the 57 or so that is above it is what informed that 10%. But you can see that as we go down, this was actually used to reduce that 57%. And therefore, the balance that was carried forward was less than the expenditure that was indicated. And the reason for that 5 billion is, in fact, an exercise which we were doing as part of GIFMIS to determine the value of contracts that were outstanding, which we were going to put in the GIFMIS to enable us control the budget better. Now, so please bear with me. You will see that, therefore, these are nominal figures. You see that it's increased. Now, what we have here is percent of GDP and then percentage of total revenue. And so you will see in this, in terms of GDP, that we have just translated, because it's easier to use, it's better to use the GDP, because one regime had oil, another regime, one oil field, two oil fields, all those things affect the GDP. You rebase, it affects the GDP. So when you use the GDP, then it becomes a very useful arbiter. So now, you will see the equivalent of the 2.3% that was, the 5 billion, translating into 2.3% of GDP. And that is the extent to which our deficit was inflated. Do you get the point I'm making? I'm saying that it's an offset, and we show that it's an offset. And therefore, when you hear that we left a deficit of 8.3 or whatever, straight away it is reduced by 2.3. So if you have a deficit of, if it's a claim that we left a deficit of 8 point something, then it means it goes down to 5. Okay, yes. Just a moment. I want to use my laptop. Okay, thank you very much. Now the same figure translates to 15% of total revenue. Okay. Now, if we graph it, you can see that it is standing here alone in this fund type. Because I said it has no precedent, it has no antecedent. Now, if you again plot it, you will see a bulge here, and you see a small item here, right, which is that ratio. If you remove it, you see this becomes flatter, and you see that, in essence, the real deficit is going down. Okay, because it's reducing the expenditure. Now, so if you, what we do here is, by way of comparison, in the absence of a homegrown policy as we had on IMF program, we have used the government's medium term. Because normally, if you want to resuscitate an economy, you would normally do it over 2 to 3 years. And so in the absence of any, program, homegrown or externally influenced, we are taking it that it is in the government's medium-term program, which is what we did with the homegrown. So we would also be mentioning the budget, for the 3 years. And then we would also highlight, now we have some performance to know whether that is achievable, because the economy went down in 2020, we are told. So we use the Q2 estimates and which was done in the media review and the actual to also indicate whether we will be going there. Because remember, we also have to look into the future. We also have to know what is happening. And we have to be measuring what is going on. Because as happened with policies like single spine and the rest, I think learning from it is important that we begin to analyze what is going on and also the forecasts that are made in future and whether they are believable, they are attainable, or not. So that is why we will be doing that exercise. So we translate that also. So you can see the yellow is telling you the performance from the media review, and it tells you that the targets are not being met. And therefore, the optimism that, unless, some measures are taken, the optimism that we will be reducing the deficit going into 2024, may not, happen. And especially if you take the revisions that the IMF and others, have been making, then you will see what we are talking about. Now we graph that also, so that tells you, that the issue we have now in Ghana is that revenue is not covering expenditures. Revenue is not total revenue, not tax revenue. It used to be total revenue. As we speak, total revenue, including grants, including our oil money, including the statutory funds and everything. When we say total revenue, we must understand. It includes all this. It's unable to pay two items in the budget, compensation and interest payments. And what this means, practically speaking, is that we are borrowing to finish paying those items. We are borrowing to run government, all the ministries, what you call the goods and services or current expenditure. We are borrowing, for capital expenditure, which is what you would normally borrow. And above all, you are borrowing to pay arrears. And the above all now comes, you are borrowing to repay the previous loans that, you contracted. So this is how dire the situation is. And this is something which we have been indicating for a very long time and tracking. So as we go along, you will see that we would always use, this is why the revenue line is important. And so the revenue line is always shown as 100%, and anything above it represents borrowing. That's what it means. And then, so here you see, if you are making progress, as with single span and other passes, then this revenue line should be moving slightly up, right? But you can see that, the media review suggests that it is not moving. Okay, this is why pictorially is very important. And therefore, if you consider that we are talking about wages and you consider that there's agitation for, more wages and others, then it means that the situation is getting worse. If you consider that we have to borrow for all the things that are listed, then that means that the interest payment will also go up and it will take more revenue. And therefore, the deficit will keep widening, right? Again, unless some drastic measures are taken. This is what is, facing us. So again, the representation that the economy is rosy, better than what we left, and we'll see that's why we have the scorecard, will tell you that, yes, we had our single spine problems, we had our, problems, such as the shortage of, the disruption in gas supply actually from Nigeria, which led to doomsday, the coinage of the word and all that. But we will see whether those problems and the global financial crisis, the drop in crude oil prices, the tariff bearing, and all those problems put together, every economy has some crisis. Whether, we did well or worse as has been, portrayed. So now, how was the 5 billion balance? Because the deficit we saw is a deficit which you call cash. That is cash coming in, cash coming out. So the odd thing is that a liability was appearing there. So to reduce it further, when you come to the arrears section of the budget, and bear with me here, if you add this four, two things are happening. You can see that almost everything here is red. And that is because you are bringing down a deficit and you are adding more. So you are increasing. It's in the red. So again, one of the things that has happened is that for the first time we had positives here. Again, it has no antecedent, it has no precedent. Right? But curiously, if you add the 4.29 to the 0.743, you will get exactly 5.03, the figure that we mentioned. And therefore, the positive was needed here to cancel what was being done, higher up. Now, the effect of this is that instead of the deficits, if you add arrears increasing, they begin to decline. So you see, you started with 18, 13, it's declining as you go down. Then you add another deficit, 1 point, it goes down to 14, then goes down further because of another positive 13, and you end up, with 10. Again, the percentages are there. So you remember we got 2.3. So if you add this 1.3 to this, you get to 2, you get a 2.3. This plus this. This is just another, offset, that was done. I won't bore you with the details. But you would have realized that the deficit that started with 8.5 has been going down to 6.1, and then going down to, it went outside to 6.8, ended with 6.1, and then 4.7. So it means the real deficit that was carried forward is either 6.1 or 4.7, depending on the accounting. That is the record in 2016. It was not. And you remember that when the parliamentarians challenged His Excellency when he presented the State of Nation address, 6.3 was used in the subsequent budget speech, which means that it's acknowledged. Now, if there was a consolidation, which means a reduction in deficit, then let me submit that it is the NDC that achieved that consolidation in 2016 for the current administration. And I think it's a very important point we should never forget. Please, the communicators and everybody, we didn't leave a deficit. These numbers are from the 2017 budget. You can go to Appendix 3B, they are there. And you can validate it for yourself. The budget, 2017. And subsequently, it has never recurred again. Okay. So having settled this, and this is one of the important things about the scorecard, so that you can lay issues bare and then understand, what is going on. Let me also state that if you take the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is 6.1, which is from our Public Financial Management Act, there has never been any year, because you have to take out the fact that they don't add bailout costs and the rest. When you add the bailout costs and the rest, there has never been any year since when the deficit has come close to 5% in our 6.1. That's even if you take it to be 6.1 and not 4.7. So that's a true record. It has not been achieved, and as we speak, the deficit is around 15%. Officially, it's indicated as, So again, the question is, a deficit of 6.1, even if we take 6.1, compared to a deficit of 11 or 15%, they continue the narrative that it did better than the NDC. Yes. Recently, it was said in Europe, in Germany, that we led a very terrible economy and all that. No. The facts are there in the numbers. And I think it's very important that, we do not accept that position. So we move on quickly. This is looking ahead, whether that record. And if you look ahead, you can see that, this is a deficit. If you go back all the way to 2013 and you keep coming, this is a deficit line. You see that the deficit declines steeply. And this is 2020. Between the presentation of the budget and the review of the budget. Now, this is the accumulation of the offsets, right, which gave the impression of the stabilizing situation, low arrears, and more importantly, the removal of the bailout costs. The removal of the bailout costs from the deficit. There are two reasons why it's not necessary. The bailout cost is fully, and we'll come to it, the bailout cost is fully provided for in ESLA. We'll show you the numbers. So we shouldn't take the blame. ESLA, the nuisance tax, covers the bailout costs adequately. And there was, if you go to the IMF Article 4 in 2019, there was a gap of 3 to 5% that existed already. I'm pointing these things out for us to understand that all the slippage that you see here, which has led to the deficit going, when the deficit goes up, it slides, cannot be attributed to COVID. So again, that is something which, is very important. That it was disclosed in Article 4, and it was disclosed actually in the report for the RCF or COVID loan. That deficit was there of 3 to 5%. And in fact, one of the bases for resolving that deficit was gold monetization. So that also is not a new phenomenon. It's not about, financial markets, opportunities and all that. And the bonds and things were named as resolving it. So again, every economy has its crisis. We do acknowledge that COVID is the severest of the crisis, but before then there was a global financial crisis, and before then there was the disruption in gas supply domestic. Earlier we would have had droughts and other things. And as we show, the important thing is to prepare for crisis in the initiatives that we put forward, which resulted in $250 million plus being taken out of the stabilization fund as a first resort to COVID. With 3 oil fields, if we had remained faithful to the stabilization fund, we would probably have withdrawn 400 to 500 million, US dollars. And that is how you win yourself of the IMF. You don't, which means that we would have borrowed less from the IMF for COVID. In any event, the borrowing, as we are saying, is not entirely, for COVID. So this is the trajectory going forward. And as you can see, there is a consolidation that is expected here. Please, it's always good professionals to look at, the numbers and to track them. If you track them, you'll see that the reason why you see with the deficit went down, then it's supposed to go down, then go up. It went down, this is the 2020, and then it's supposed to go up, taper, go down slightly, and by 2022 start, declining, right? But this decline in itself, as we can see, is because important factors like bailout costs and the rest were indicated as 0. If you add them, there's no decline, or no decline is anticipated. So if you ever think that, as essential with 2014, 2024, there will be a consolidation, plug in the bailout costs first before you get confident that, you'll be inheriting, an economy with consolidation. Because we see the IMF has indicated that the bailout cost is going to, and we know it, that it's going to be a while before it tapers, so it cannot be 0. Those costs cannot be 0. And there are other costs also, like wages, interest payments, and the rest, which and the borrowing, which we have already stated. So this is just an exercise. We can have sessions, for those who are inclined to the fiscal and to the macroeconomy, the technical team, to go into it as part of our preparation. It's important that you prepare for what to expect, instead of just, as has been in the past, you are slapped with, single spine, you are slapped with this, and it derails your beginning, your start, which you would have wished, for. Now, public debt. Again, let me just go quickly. These are the numbers. But again, we are said to have left a lot of arrears and debt. The question is, these are the official figures. Going into this should be 2013 is about 49. Okay, there's an error there. 47. Now, we are at 80. Ladies and gentlemen, you leave a figure of 47 less than 50. It is increased by 35. And the record is that the government, the incumbent, did better than you did. That's the narrative again. Right? But you could see that what we left, and again, sometimes they say we left 70% debt. That is based on the old basis. And even that will show that we were beginning to slow down the rate of borrowing. We'll just show it because of the sinking fund and things that we set up, which started to reverse. So I'm suggesting that even if you took 70% as where we left off, and you perform well, you should be reducing the 70%, not increasing it to 80 plus. So again, this is another narrative which we think we have to, educate our people so we don't accept. Another narrative which we were discussing is said that we left a very bad, deficit of 2.8, slow down growth. That's 2.8 growth in 2016. But we had our crisis. Yes, we did have crisis. We also budgeted, for $99 per barrel, and we ended up with 35. It never recovered until 2017. We had one oil field. We passed on 3 oil fields. So we had our crisis. Yes, COVID may be severe. It led to, we are not denying that, right? So we left, but the point I'm making is that 70%, which is the old basis, old GDP basis. So again, know the numbers, right? Because we've been, pointing it out, and especially let me acknowledge our parliamentarians for bringing this up constantly, you will see that the old numbers are no longer being compared, apples and oranges, to, the rebase, basis, right? But occasionally it comes up. But I'm saying that even if you use our old basis, we left off better in 4 years than, the current administration at 80%. And the record is there to show. So, and this is the point I was making, that this is the debt. And you can see that if you go to HIPIC, you will see it rising. And then because of borrowing for single spine and others, it rose. But by the time we finished paying for single spine arrears and others, it started tapering. It started going down. It tapered and it started actually going down. So this is what I'm talking about. It was going up. The rate at which we were borrowing was going up because of those programs. But by 2014, when we started, you remember the smart borrowing, right? Through self-financing, through sinking funds, the initiatives. And this again to show that our policies worked. I think we should not be told that our policies did not work. The policies worked. And the evidence is there. This is the rate of borrowing which started to decline. And then, because those measures were stopped for 2017, you can see the rate of borrowing going up. Again, we are using official figures, right? And this this graph has always been shown in the budgets up to 2019. It's no longer being shown. And it's in the debt management report. I'm not sure if it's in the 2021, but it's in the 2019 debt management report. So if anybody contests the fact that we reduced the rate of borrowing recently, you would have realized that, you would have read or heard, that the rate of borrowing has been going down better than even the Kwame Nkrumah era, better than even the period that you had HIPIC, when our debt was forgiven. Still, the rate of borrowing was better. But this is a true official rate of borrowing, and we have it with the numbers. And so again, we should not accept that narrative. We brought down the rate of borrowing by any measure, that is taken. And this is the reason why we slow down the accumulation of debt. Okay. So these are the same thing. So trends are very important. At the beginning, it may be one time, so it doesn't show the trend. But now we have the trend, and I think that we can use this to empower, our communicators to show that, we performed, better. So these are all, let me just highlight this. What we have here is, I do not want to end on only a fiscal note, but you can see here, this is the rate of inflation. And the thing about the inflation rate is also like the GDP rebasing. The basket was changed in 2018, right? And therefore, it led to a tightening of the inflation. Of course, it's warranted. Why? Because the service sector and others have become larger. So you need to change the basket, which is the same reason this was used for the rebasing. But it is not a matter of prop. This is the reason for the drop, and this is why it is not showing immediately, in the basket of goods. That I had a similar experience giving an amount of money to my driver. I won't mention the amount. And he came back and he said, I asked him, okay, so can we make the trip? And he said, that amount used to fill the tank. He said it's 3/4, you want 3/4. Now, this is the rate of growth I've mentioned already. There's no way in which 2.8 performance with difficulties can be equated to 0.4% growth rate. And throughout the period that the economy slowed, for us, we did not bring the economy close to recession. We have had 2 consecutive quarters of recession. It was widely reported. Do we know how significant that is? I have seniors here as a PNDC boy. That was the first time since 1983 under the Structural Adjustment Program that Ghana came close to recession. And that is the result of the fundamentals or the basis that was laid in the successive structural adjustment programs. In fact, the last time Ghana experienced negative growth, which we came close to, was before 1983. And some of you economists who have seen, a graph which is popular, you see the oscillation from positive to negative, and then from 1983, it stops and it's all positive. Right. So I think both antecedents and currents. So we had difficulties, yes. But again, it's important to know that one of the reasons for the sharp increase is like 2011, oil, into 2012, when we did 14%. There's no acknowledgement. But TEN and Sankofa Field gave the significant growth in 2017 because crude oil prices and output, started to increase. Again, there's talk about interest rates. Please, let us note, these are official. You see that the interest rate, yes, was going up because we were borrowing to resolve all those headaches and problems. But by the time we started by the time we started the refinancing and we started the sinking fund and all, and we're borrowing less, you will see that the treasury bill rate started to decline. So it started declining, from around about 2014. right? So that it's not true that, we did not have a declining rate of interest. And you can see that some of the interest rates, I believe this is a 1-year bond and the rest, and you can see that while this has tapered, it has not gone down. It should have been in the 5% if we had followed that trend. By now, interest rates should have gone down to maybe 5 to 6%, right? And you can see that other interest rates have gone up in the interim, and so this is the monetary policy rate, which obviously we have some agreements under the IMF program and others, and therefore, even though we're achieving these results, especially debt and the rest, you recall that we were not, could not convince the fund that we need to, the Monetary Policy Committee. Of course, we respected it. But from 2017, it started going down because obviously the oil and other things had made, the situation much better. Okay, so we end on this, macroeconomic notes because we are not going to be covering a lot more of the real sector and others, right? But you can see from the fiscal and everything that we did much better. Is ESNA a lost potential? We know the history of ESNA, so let me not, the banking sector was going down because of VRA, energy sector debt, road arrears and the rest, and that's what happened with a slowing economy. And because crude oil prices were falling, we decided to put the ESNA on the falling crude oil price because it will not have an impact. And by then, we had also started something called a strategic stock. Anyway, one of the credits for those policies, and I think it's very important, we should remember that around about June of 2015 was when we saw the last petrol queues in the country. And that's a result of the strategic stock policies that we were implementing. I think Honorable Saka and others were part of those meetings, right? And we're able to also stabilize the price through oil and, and others. But the point I'm making here is that ESNA was to last 3 to 5 years. And it's not true that we did not have a plan for resolving the banking sector crisis. Our plan was ESNA. And in fact, we did the first restructuring. We did the first restructuring of the debt. Belonged to VRA, owed to 11 to 13 banks. And we injected 250 of the initial ESNA money that came in, and then restructured 2.2 billion. Before we left, we handed over a term sheet for 600 million, which was to pay the IPP and other energy sector debt. So again, the fact that it wasn't done, and the revenue that was to go to the banks was turned into a loan, turning cash into a loan, it's mind-boggling, but that is what happened. I don't think we should take responsibility for it, right? The Big Bang was a choice, a policy choice, because we could also have done the Big Bang. But we decided, learning again from PNDC era, you remember, National Non-Performing Assets Recovery Trust, impact, a bad bank option was what we were, to ring fence, the non-performing loans, and then use ESNA to pay the banks, and then you do the recoveries and others over a period of time. And that is the experience of the US and others after, two or two of those banks collapsed. So you see that throughout this COVID crisis, fewer countries, if any, collapse their banks. Of course, it can be closed voluntarily, right? So we are saying that it was a policy choice. But these are the numbers. This is what ESNA is bringing in, and this is what ESNA is supposed to bring in. And this is from the ESNA report. Again, official numbers, please. No speculation. So you can see ESNA was 2015. So you can see that the monies that came in of about 3.2, you see the energy debt recovery was what we used for the VRA and the policies that I was talking about. And because we anticipated these revenues, average of 3 billion, which has gone up to 4 billion by 2020, bringing in 15 billion with elements of the energy sector, and then you can see road fund. Much of the financing for the roads and things that are taking place after the parking are coming from here, right? So this is the JM, only 1 year, because ESLA brought in that money, we started. We had anticipated that we were going to go in past style, but support it with these revenues. Because obviously, Nanatu is here, we don't have the donors to give us the money and all that. So we had to use, our own means to do it. Now, so you can see that from 2017, the current administration has benefited from the actual flows that has come in of about 15 billion in total, and it is projected to bring in 25 billion by 43 billion by 2024. That is the power of ESLA. Remember, ESLA, the nuisance tax, the rate was increased, if you remember, twice, right? Because the term sheets and others were not used to arrest the energy sector problems early enough. So it has festered, right? Ladies and gentlemen, the point I'm trying to make is that we had provided a wherewithal, for the cleaning of the energy and debt, energy and banking sector crisis in addition to the rules. And that is a policy that was derided. ESLA was to go away. Sorry, usually my punchlines don't count. So. Okay, so I'm saying that, yes, in fact, we did the asset quality review report. The asset quality review, which gave rise to the current banking sector crisis and others, was done by the NDC. And it is that which informed this. And yes, there were malfeasance. Not denying that. But we have corporate entities which are different from the owners. That's one crucial point. And banks are systemic to the economy, right? So you look for, in fact, Europe now has a banking dissolution or resolution law, which is what we were going to implement, right? So that if a bank is going, it will be wound down, probably gradually. The owners, would have to, whatever assets will be sold, but a big bank was definitely not our option. Let me repeat, it's a policy option, right? We had an alternative, which would have kept most of the banks, if not all, standing. Because it takes a long time, in some cases 20, 30 years for those banks. And since the collapse of the banks, I'm not sure that we have been able to raise an indigenous bank to the level of 400 million capitalization. So this is a graph. Let me just focus on one. The whole of the yellow is the ESLA money that has come to the current administration. And the blue is what we came in, which we did not even fully utilize. So again, I don't think that we should accept this narrative that, we left the current administration to go and borrow to resolve, the banking sector crisis. What happened to 43 billion? Couldn't it be used to restructure, even if you had to pay in advance? Again, this is a narrative which I think we should not accept. I'm saying that think the figure is, Your Excellency, 7%. And so you can say over 90% has gone to the current administration. And this is cash. This is cash which we pay when we go to fuel. Because ESLA, and it was supposed to have gone off in 5 years. So if you take 2015, as at 2020, ESLA would have gone. And we're confident that it would have gone in the current, situation that we are facing. By the way, ESLA won a prize. If you Google it, ESLA prize, and you see, yes, ESLA won the EMEA, that is the Emerging Market Prize, in 2017 for the structure to resolve, national debt. It won. You will see the picture, and you can send me, those who are in the picture. Right? No acknowledgement, but that doesn't matter. We just have to note that ESLA structuring and everything won the nation a prize in the financial markets. Petroleum. Again, the PRMA rules, are they unraveling? There was deep thinking that went into the fashioning of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act. That's what PRMA. Because there were problems that the economy was facing for a long time. And as I said, as a PNDC boy, I used to sit, behind the tables with my senior and others, on some chairs taking notes, because I was also on the Structural Adjustment Program, secretariat. Then that was before VAT. So we are saying that all those problems we are talking about, commodity prices fall, and then the economy is in trouble because we don't have, and now oil revenue, let me add cocoa, gold, and then the economy is in problem. Debt was becoming a problem. We had declared HIPIC, and so we said never again. And the reason why the focus was on oil was that oil was a new resource to the budget, which you can use, to attend to, some of these, problems. So what was the structure? And what problems were envisaged to be resolved? One, GNPC is in the news. To empower GNPC, to be a true national oil company. So GNPC's budget is approved. And after it is approved, then the fiscal and economic, challenges receive some oil money. And the first one is what I mentioned, the stabilization fund. 21% of the GNPC. And this is what in advanced countries they call fiscal buffers. It's very simple. You increase the fund when the times are good, and then you reduce it when the times are bad. So it's like getting a bonus or a pay raise, and then you save part of it for school fees and others. That's when the times, and then when some calamity or other children going to hospital and the rest, and you spend. That is the principle behind it. And it worked. Because when we had a crisis in 2015, I recall that we were able to take 250 million, but it was Ghana cedis, compared to the 250 million US dollars. And so with 3 oil fields, can you imagine how much, as I said earlier on, we would have taken out if we had continued, to put money? Because we can say for sure that part of that 250 million, or a substantial part of it, was what we left in the stabilization fund. The cap has not been, restored or removed. And so more stabilization fund needs to go in. But this is rules-based. So for our parliamentarians, this is rules-based. Let us look at the rule. It talks about the deficit for continuous quarters. And if, the condition prevails, then you will withdraw from it. So as the economy recovers, we should not please. We would, look at the formula, and then we have to advise whether it's time to reverse and put money in. Now, once you cap it, you must use it for debt service and the contingency fund. So we use it to establish the contingency fund in the 1992 Constitution for the first time. And then for debt management, this is the source of the sinking fund which was performing that magic. Right? Because the cap was going, it wasn't going to consumption, but it was going to reduce the debt. It's only when you reduce the debt and your interest rates start, going down, and the foreign yields are there to show, that you can borrow at a low cost, as many countries do, and you can borrow to do your projects, and the commercial projects will have to pay so that it doesn't, depend on the taxpayer. And that is the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. Of course, we all know about the ABFA and the Heritage Fund. So let me just, move on. The main point here is that, please, these provisions are due for review, particularly the Heritage Fund, in 15 years, which is around about 2023 or so. So we need to be vigilant, so that it is not taken out for consumption. If you remember the debate whether we should, take out the stabilization fund, it's for a purpose. So again, similar to ESNA, we have this. These are the revenues that are flowed in. And this whole portion, the larger portion, this is the Professor Mills portion, 15%. This is the Mahama portion. And you can see half of it in the last 3 years alone has accumulated to the current administration on account of Sankofa and Tenfield. Oh, okay. I was waiting to the end, but we are almost, I think we are almost at the end. So, okay, so you will see again that this is one of the legacies that we left. If you take the last 11 years or 10 years, this is the 10th anniversary of oil, 2011 to 2021. And so the scorecard shows that more revenue, oil revenue has flowed to the current administration from 3 oil fields than the 8 years of, Mills Mahama. So again, one cannot say this is a poor legacy to leave. So if you take this revenue from Tenfield and Sankofa and you add it to ESLA and you add it to, by the way, sinking fund, I almost forgot. We used $550 million of the sinking fund, oil revenue, to pay off the first sovereign bond by His Excellency Kufuor. Remember, it was 2007 to 2017. And by 2014, we had reckoned that should we win the 2017 elections, we would have to look for money, to pay that. Let me get you the rationale. I hear sometimes comments that, we could have spent the money, and we kept it in the MPP. I think it was a good intention. Maybe if I may be defensive here. Because the question is, did you believe that you were going to win the 2017? And where were you going to get $750 million? Because no provision had been made to redeem, that bond. So Cabinet decided that we should set up the sinking fund, and we started buying off. So by the time we left in 2016, we had bought about $336 million of that from the secondary markets. Now, we had to make a disclosure when we were going for the 2016 bond, according to the rules. And so those who were holding the remaining amount of money, the bonds, decided not to put it on the market. Why? Because the interest rate was going down, right? And they preferred to end at 8.5 at maturity. So we're waiting for them. The maturity date was October 4th, I think, That's an anniversary of the bond. And I can assure you that we had about $250 million in the sinking fund, and the current administration used it to pay off the remaining $200 million on the bond, on that bond. So again, I don't think this is a terrible legacy, to have left. A successor, no. And I think it's important. In any event, we had a program, a plan. Again, in a technical session, we can show it. To use the sinking fund, we had refinanced the balance, 550, and then to pay it off, and to start paying down, and not wait for 10 years as we did, the new bonds that we were introducing, which were for 10 years. And with 10 Sankofa, we were sure this is the only way you can borrow effectively. This again was slowed down or stopped, and that is what is leading to the current, debt situation, because the funds, despite oil, additional oil, are not being used, for the purpose. So again, this is the same information, from the oil fields. Later on, you can have the benefit of it, which you can see the graph wherever you go, whether money going into ABFA, money going into whatever, you see that clearly. There was more money flowing, to the economy. Now, again, as I said, we also face a calamity. You see, this is the price of crude. And you see that we were able to do most of what we were doing because crude oil prices hit about $100 per barrel, which came to hurt us, when the prices dropped to about 33. As I said, we prepared a budget with 99. So you see that in terms of oil price, together with the tariff bearing, you remember the FPSO, Jubilee tariff bearing, and all that, we suffered the most decline in price. You can see around about 2015, right? And then it started going up till we left office in 2016, and this is the increase. So it's only COVID that has brought it down, but COVID has not brought it down with 3 oil fields to this level. Right, so again, in terms of achievement, I think that now we have the data, now we have the information, we're putting it together. I don't think we should accept, again, the narrative, or that, there was more pain, right? If you take oil revenue, you take ESNA, and let me say confidently that this administration also had the most support for a crisis in our history. IMF, 1 billion, Bank of Ghana, 1.7 billion, World Bank, African Development, and others put together, about 500 to 600, million, right, and counting. And then the 250 million stabilization fund. So if you take these resources and you take the flows that have come in for COVID, I can say that yes, COVID is painful, and COVID is something which is unprecedented in terms of the short, not the effect of the economy per se, but closure of the borders and the rest, right? But there was a lot of resources that have flowed. And this is why we must dig deeper. Was there a problem other than COVID? If we have all these resources. So we can see what we have presented, Your Excellency, Madam, that we did not look backwards to be stuck in the past. We look at the current, and we can say with some confidence that we had certain policies, we need to sharpen them, to have addressed some of the problems and crises that faces. But we also had a package. I won't go through all of them. You remember GIFMIS, you remember revenue modernization, you remember the tax laws, remember we set up a GRA, we merged IRS and the VAT service, where I used to be deputy commissioner, together to form the domestic tax division, and we were on course. We did single window, if you remember, which is digitalization, right? And then we're on course to do the domestic attend to, so that we could strengthen. And in fact, from the beginning, despite all the difficulties that we had, our total revenue and tax revenue in 2015 remains unmatched, the levels, in terms of GDP. And so I want to thank you very much, for listening, and I'll hand over to the moderator. Thank you very much. Chairman, excuse me.
Right. Thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation on the economy in general. But then this is academic environment. We have to subject your presentation to a bit of technical scrutiny. And oh yes. Right. So as a chairman, I'll take my question first before we open the floor for the others to ask questions. Now, when you say bailout cost, did you factor in the interest that will be accrued on the bailout cost, or is because it's government money, it's just capped just like that? That's one question. And then the other one, only two questions on the fiscals. You realize that the fiscal, directions, looking at our revenue, looking at our expenditure, was on its own trajectory, which perhaps as a former finance minister, you will know what is driving this trajectory. Then suddenly, COVID came in and we hear that there's been a blow up in our deficit. Can you perhaps open up on what was driving the trajectory we had before COVID? And what do you think will be the measured effect of the COVID on this economy? This is very, very important. I think I'll take that too and then leave the rest for.
Yeah, thank you very much. The bailout cost includes interest. You recall that, in fact, the restructuring that we did, because we put together the non-performing loans, which had interest. They were bundled, all those costs, and they were to be paid out of, and it's being paid out of ESLA. So, yes, it includes interest. Now, if you take the current administration, recall that they had converted the cash, including the VRA restructuring that we did, into the ESLA bond, right? And taking an external and domestic loan. The bond means that they had borrowed, right? That is carrying interest. So it also has an element, of interest. The controversial point is whether bailout includes the energy costs, which we had included. And you recall the debate in the 2015 budget, where the energy sector arrears were not shown as expenditure, they were not shown as arrears. They kept the arrears at the same level, and straight away it went into amortization or debt repayment, right? You cannot program to pay for a debt if you didn't incur it. So one can argue that maybe it's the ESLA bond, but then the ESLA revenue is included in the budget. So you must show the expenditure, but showing it would have meant the deficit would have gone up, and that goes to your second question. The trajectory, you recall, was, I recall, 3.7 or 3.9 to 4.5, then 4.7, and that was when we were set to be consolidated. But if you go to the IMF 2019 Article 4, right, all those things were adjusted. In fact, 2018 was adjusted to about 5.8%. 2019, I think 2018, 2019 were adjusted to 2017 was barely adjusted. So it was adjusted to 7% deficit and then to 7.2%, which some of us have been arguing because the bailout costs in particular were not being shown, to determine the deficit. They were being shown as a footnote, which was for the first time. That's what we call exceptional costs. So the short answer is, because the fund and others, and we also point out this, our MPs and the rest pointed this out. You know, in fact, our MPs and the rest came up with the fact that the deficit was more around 7% than the 4.5 and others. And this was borne out in Article 4, which revised the figures backwards, right? So it's like the current situation where we keep insisting that the deficit for 2020 was 11.3%, but in actual fact it's close to 15%. You know, if you added all those things. And this is where Fitch, the ratings agencies and others also put, you know. And people ask why the reference to IMF and these multilaterals. Yes, it's not about austerity. It is because Article 4 is Article 4 of the fund, the constitution of the fund, when you join. And you have to open your books for the fund to look at the health of your economy, whether you have a program or you don't have a program. That's why we have had to, Article 4, after their exit. You have to. And you have to make disclosures. And in fact, the draft is sent to the minister and the governor for them to review. What we call the Article 4 reports and the rest. And if you have comments and things, and when your country is being considered, your executive director actually goes to, you know, respond at the board before the report comes out. So it tells you that there's a certain level of credibility that goes, you know, with, and it is done for all countries. It's done for the US, it's done for Germany. You know, I always tell people, just Google Article 4 Germany, you see it. Even the advanced countries who are on the board, they have to open their books. And so that is a measure of credibility, you know, which goes with it. You know, so I hope in fact, it was quantified. That's the point I was making. The deficit was quantified at about, the cost of COVID was quantified at about 3%. And so if you, in the RCF report, that's the COVID loan report. So if you add the 3% to the 4.5%, that should give you 7 points, you know, what? 7, let's say 8%. So even by the official numbers, Y11 was accounting for the gap. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. May you put your hands again together. The questions will come. And I think there's a slight change in the program. It's understandable. But before I come to what I'm going to tell you now, there's something called the elevator pitch. Who knows elevator pitch? If you find yourself in the same elevator with the rich people in this world, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, Sam Piale, and in the same elevator, and you are supposed to ask one question that will change your fortune. They asked one Nigerian person, what question will you ask these rich men and women in the same elevator to change your fortune? You know what the Nigerian said? Just rob them. Don't ask any question. Just rob them and they'll be rich, and don't keep on asking questions. There are some few who are not introduced today, but as I said, the same Nigerian. I hope there are no Nigerians here, I'm sorry. If they are here, forgive me. The few were not introduced today, and Madam Joyce, you are not introduced. A special aid to the former president. You are recognized. You are here. Dr. Joseph de Graft Kwanzaa, the Dean of the Faculty of Law, Central University, a proud member of Pro Forum. A long list here. My own brother's slide has been introduced. Sylvester, do you want to be introduced again? Oh, yeah. He doesn't want, but he's a former CEO of the National Health Insurance. We have Alfred Boyan, the National Treasurer, Governing Council of CIMG. Alfred, well, you are here. Thank you. Madame Ruth Della Sedo, Deputy National Youth Organizer. And I just had a call from the NUCS president, and he's here with his executive. NUCS president, are you here? Oh, he's here. The NUCS, they are well represented. On this note, I know we have a lot of people who are pregnant with questions. When I say pregnant, you know what I'm talking about. Pregnant with questions. But our former head of state, our flag bearer, has something to tell us before the Q&A sessions will come in. On this note, please put your hands together as I welcome. Please, you may be upstanding. You are tired. Physiologically, it's even good for all of us, especially those of us above 60. Thank you very much. Do you have a sanitizer around here? Oh, you have your own mic. Okay. Thank you. Right. Thank you, boss.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking our colleagues of Pro Forum for putting this together, and also the Center for Ethical Governance and Administration. There are several occasions on which I have suggested to this government that it does help in certain times of difficulty to try to build a consensus on policy going forward. And I give the example that it worked for me at a time when we're facing strong headwinds in the economy. And Seth and others, P.V. Obeng of blessed memory and others, came together and said, look, why don't we hold a national dialogue on the economy and bring everybody together so that we come out with a homegrown fiscal policy that all of us can have a buy-in to. And that led to the Senchi Forum, which was held at the Senchi Hotel. And Seth, P.V. Obeng, and several other people were key in bringing this together. And it led to the homegrown fiscal policy, which we eventually, when we went into the IMF, presented as our policy document. And it was adopted hook, line, and sinker. Nothing was added to it. And it was on that platform that the economic turnaround began to occur. I suggested it several times, but it doesn't look like that is the... Should I take it off? Well, some people say they can't see my face, so... Since all of you are in mask, I can take mine off and feel protected. And so it led to the homegrown fiscal policy. That led to the economic turnaround and the fiscal consolidation that we began to achieve before we handed over in 2016. In the absence of a national dialogue like that, platforms like this are important to give the other perspective. You know, government has access to all the tools of communication, and so monetary policy committee report, so report, the finance minister comes to parliament, gives a media review and all that. But you need platforms that will give other perspectives to what government's hymn sheet is. And I think that that is what we have attempted today. For those of you who are not students of economics, you must have found the tables and things a bit boring. But we intentionally came here to the University of Ghana Business School, to the CD conference room, to give, you know, the students here, you know, an opportunity to look at what the other side was. And I think that Seth has given a good technical perspective. I am not an economic expert, and so my presentation would deal more with bread and butter issues. As a politician, I'm not going to go into tables and others, but I will say it as I believe it is. And so, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking Mr. Seth Terkper for his comprehensive delivery, which has brought home a number of key issues surrounding our recent economic trajectory. I do not intend to belabor the points he has made, except to reinforce a few of them. I'm a historian at heart, and so I like to look at these things from a historical perspective in order to give context to what we are witnessing today. Much has been made of the impact of COVID-19 on the Ghanaian economy. The truth, however, is that our economic history has, over the last few decades, been characterized by booms and busts, dictated by both domestic and external factors. For those of you who have looked historically at the Ghanaian economy, we have periods where we have booms, and then we have periods where we have busts. Most of these busts are created by either external economic shocks or some prevailing conditions within. Since the days of President Jerry John Rawlings, and even before then, these shocks have cyclically derailed incremental progress made over the years. The older generation, for those of you who are my age and around there, would recall how bushfires and droughts in the early 80s plunged the Ghanaian economy into crisis, leading to a very lengthy period of negative growth and very high inflation. By dint of hard work and skillful management, the then PNDC government managed to salvage the economy and brought back sustained positive economic growth. For those of you who remember the Economic Recovery Program, the Structural Adjustment Programs, and all the acronyms that came with them. And when some people fell through the social safety nets and we needed to find social interventions to support them, we came up with the PAMSCAD, Program of Action to Mitigate the Social Cost of Adjustment. For those of you who are my age, you remember all those things. And so it brought back positive economic growth until this was again undermined in the early 90s by falling commodity prices, which led to dwindling export revenues in the 90s. When the Kufuor administration took over, we went into the Highly Indebted Poor Country Initiative, HIPIC, for those of you who remember, in order to secure debt relief. Up to $3.8 billion of our debt was written off. And this offered significant fiscal space for us to begin the process of development again. At this period too, there was a transition in the structure of the economy from one, it started in Kufuor's era and it crystallized in Professor Mills' era, because I remember in 2010, that was the year when services overtook agriculture as the biggest contributor to the Ghanaian economy's GDP. But the process started in President Kufuor's time. Services began to grow at an astronomical rate. And by 2010, they overtook agriculture. And so it changed the structure of our economy. In the latter years of the President Agyekum Kufuor administration, we discovered oil in commercial quantities. And we joined the League of Oil-Producing Countries. A global financial crisis reared its head around this time. And this also impacted our economy negatively. Then in came the Mills administration, under which I had the privilege of serving as vice president and head of the economic management team. We in turn inherited a large budget deficit and huge arrears, as well as a depreciating currency. The effects of the single spine pay salary also impacted revenues. Many people tend to overlook the fact that it was during this era that Ghana also recorded its most prosperous period of economic management. We had the highest levels of economic growth before oil production kicked in. For instance, in 2010, we grew at 8% without oil, non-oil growth. We didn't have oil, we grew at 8%. And then at 14.4% in 2011 with oil. By this time, we had become an oil producer. That was the first year of oil production, which happens to be the highest growth Ghana has experienced in history. But let me say that non-oil growth for 2011, that is without oil, was 8.4%. Oil topped up to make the 14.4%. And the following year, 2012, we grew at 9.3%. We also achieved the longest sustained period of single-digit inflation of 33 months, among several other important milestones. The cyclical shocks came back with a vengeance between 2013 and 2016. These included problems with power production, for those of you who remember, when unreliable gas supplies and frequent breakdown of power generation equipment resulted in a protracted power crisis that severely affected our economy. This was compounded by huge revenue shortfalls in the oil sector because of the lower than expected production from our only oil field at the time. At the time, we had only the Jubilee field, even though at this time we were working on ENI Sankofa and the 10 field. There was a problem with the turret of the FPSO, Kwame Nkrumah, if you remember. And so they had to make some adjustments and reduce production to keep it going. So instead of 120,000 barrels, we're producing about 70,000 barrels. And that affected oil revenues. So all these were shocks again that came after booms. So we have booms and busts, booms and busts. When confronted with these challenges, we put in real efforts to address them comprehensively and laid down critical structures that today have become some of the most important pillars supporting the Ghanaian economy. And Seth gave you the example of the Energy Sector Levy Act, which has become one of the most important domestic revenue pillars that we have. When we inherited the oil economy in 2009, we put in place the necessary mechanisms and institutional arrangements to ensure that Ghana derives the maximum benefit. We passed the PRMA, which is the Public Revenue Management Act, under which we set up the Stabilization and Heritage Funds with about $500 million in them at the time we left power in 2017. We tackled the power crisis head on, and by the time we left office in January 2017, we had more than sufficient generation capacity to withstand any shocks in the energy sector. And above all, we brought stability to the energy sector and reliability in fuel supply for power generation when we built the Tuabo gas plants to process our own natural gas. And as I said, we set up the Energy Sector Levy Act, which by 2024 should have yielded up to about 40 billion Ghana cedis. This stands us in good stead to overcome the stifling legacy debts in the energy sector and help address the liquidity challenges in that area. We set up the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, GIF, to mobilize capital to undertake major infrastructural projects, and one of its first success stories, many people don't know this, is that GIF was included in the structuring of the financing of Terminal 3 at the Kotoka International Airport. We also established the Ghana Exim Bank to promote trade and commerce and industry within the Ghanaian economy. We set up the Sinking Fund, which is a mechanism through which we would set aside funds to retire maturing debt. And as of 2016, we had saved up to 550 million to pay off the first sovereign bond, which was floated under President Kufuor. If you remember, the first Eurobond was due, and we had saved up to 550 million. We did it, of course, hoping that we will win the 2016 election, but of course, we did it for Ghana, because when this new government came, but for the fact that we set aside that money, they would have very serious problems paying off that bond. We also had the contingency fund, from which money was found recently to underwrite the relief efforts in the aftermath of the 3rd June disaster. No, we set it up after our experience with the 3rd June disaster. We did all of these alongside massive investments in capital projects with a view to accelerating our economic development. We ensured that we kept our public debt within manageable levels, with debt amounting to 56% of GDP based on the rebased economic figures. This government likes to quote the debt to GDP in our time at the old GDP figures, and then they do an adjustment in this time with the current debt to show that the debt level is better than it was under our period. But I mean, that is disingenuous. If you rebase the economy, then same must match with same. You can't compare apples with oranges. We also brought down the rate of accumulation of debt, as has been vividly demonstrated by the former finance minister in his presentation. It became necessary in 2014 for for us to go into partnership with the IMF in order to achieve more success implementing our homegrown fiscal consolidation policies that we had crafted as a response to the economic turbulence resulting from the shocks that I have spoken about earlier. Now, when we went to the IMF, this was the 16th time that Ghana was seeking assistance from the IMF as a nation. Though our opponents at the time made it sound as though it was novel and it was anathema, I made a point then that it was to be our last resort to the IMF because I was confident that having the program straddle 3 years, though we had just 2 years left in office, it was going to ensure that a succeeding government would have the opportunity to continue from where we left off and do things that would make subsequent programs completely unnecessary. It is noteworthy that the program was extended by another year by the Akufo-Addo administration, and they received in excess of $300 million, which was the final tranche of the extended credit facility that came with the program. If you remember, the facility was a little over $900 million. And so by the time we left office, some 600 and something million had been disbursed. And so the new administration got the balance of the 300 and something million. I'm on record to have predicted in November 2016 that due to the work we had done to overcome the economic headwinds and the coming on stream of 2 additional oil fields, Sankofa and Tenfield, economic growth was going to exceed 7% in 2017 and beyond. I said this during the State of the Nation address, I predicted. And this was confirmed by the World Bank and IMF, which predicted that growth was going to exceed 8% in 2017 and beyond. Additional oil revenue, a resolved energy crisis, paving way for more and sustained generation of power and sound implementation of our homegrown policies were going to make life more comfortable for the new government that inherited after 2017. Despite these favorable conditions, most of the gains we made and bequeathed to this new government have been eroded, and we've been plunged again into economic crisis. COVID-19 has become the convenient whipping boy and has been cited as the reason for the crisis we face now and the attendant economic hardship. Yes, COVID-19 affected the economy, and no one can dispute that. It is, however, not the main reason why we're in the current hole we find ourselves. COVID-19 only became a pretext for reckless election-related expenditure, which produced the largest ever budget deficit in recent economic history of Ghana last year. Indeed, you would remember that at a time when the new government had just taken over, a year or two after, when things, they were still enjoying the largesse that we had left them, one of the leading members of the government said that their reserves had grown so big that if any external shock affected Ghana, Ghana would be able to go 3 months without seeking any external assistance. I don't know how many of you remember that statement. When COVID hit, it didn't take 2 weeks for the Ghanaian economy to go on its knees. But for the IMF intervention, I mean, this economy would have collapsed completely. And so much about the resilience of the economy. Our debt has ballooned to unsustainable levels, topping 80% of GDP and exposing us to very high risk of debt default. Almost all of our tax revenues is used to service our debt and interest rate, and the effect has been the introduction of several new taxes. Indeed, I think I heard Seth say that if you take total revenue, not total tax revenue, total revenue, it covers just compensation, that is wages and salaries and compensation and interest payments. And so everything else, goods and services, capital expenditure, we have to borrow to be able to do. That's the reality of the economy today. And that is why we are on a borrowing spree. And it's a spiral that cannot be sustained. You cannot borrow more than, continue borrowing more than you earn. And so we'll see how that ends up. But this is the reality we're facing today. Almost all our tax revenues is used to service our debts, and the effect has been the introduction of several new taxes. You all know the COVID tax. During the elections, we enjoyed sweet, free water, free power, and at the time, several people warned us that somebody will have to pay for it anyway. Immediately after the elections, when the COVID taxes were brought and we complained, you know, we were told that, well, it was not free to the generators, and so somebody has to pay those who generate the power, and that's why we are being subjected to these new taxes. So this has led to rampant increments in the prices of goods and services, and this is primarily responsible for the hardship that Ghanaians are going through today. A comparison with our neighbors and peers in sub-Saharan Africa, all of whom were also affected by COVID-19, shows that they have been able to protect their citizens from COVID-19 in ways that are similar to ours. They have, however, avoided increasing their debts and deficits because of more prudent management of their economies. And so if you make a comparison of our economy and our neighbors, you find that our economy has been more affected in terms of debt, in terms of deficit, than our neighbors have. And what can account for that? And that is even if you take the statistics at face value. I have accused this finance minister of creative accounting. And now you cannot trust government figures. And before, we left it to academia and research think tanks to interrogate the figures and help us come with a reality of what the economic situation currently is. As he was talking, he mentioned that in many of the budgets, the bailout costs were left as footnotes. The energy sector debt was left as footnotes. And they were not captured as part of the deficit in order to give a better deficit figure. But if you added those liabilities, and there are liabilities that are government liabilities, they are nobody else's liabilities. And so if you are budgeting, you must take cognizance of them. But in order that we can give a better picture, so that when we go on the bond market to borrow, we can get a more favorable borrowing condition, we leave those figures out. And that has become a major problem. This government must accept that it is their mismanagement of the economy, their thirst for consumption expenditure, and the desire to spend beyond their means in order to win elections that have plunged us into the current crisis, not necessarily COVID-19. COVID-19 has exacerbated it, and as COVID normally does, it takes advantage of underlying pre-existing conditions. And so so COVID has taken advantage of the underlying conditions of the economy to make things even worse for us. And so currently our economy is in ICU, and we all must pray hard that we are able to survive as a nation. This government has been the luckiest government under the Fourth Republic. They benefited from 60% of all the oil revenues accruing to Ghana since we began producing oil. Since we began producing oil, if you take all the oil revenues we have earned, 100%, this government alone in 5 years, 4.5 years, has gotten 60% of all those oil revenues. They have had more than twice the total tax revenue available to us. If you take taxes as a whole, they have had 100% more in terms of tax revenues than any of the previous governments before. And they've enjoyed unprecedented support from our development partners. That's the IMF, the World Bank, and all the other partners. Within a space of 12 months, this government has received up to 11 billion Ghana cedis from the IMF alone, and have received over $200 million from the World Bank and other donors. They've had access to over 200 million from the stabilization fund that we set up. And they got the central bank to finance them to a tune of 10 billion Ghana cedis. And the comparative with the central bank financing is that in 2016, the budget of Ghana was run the whole of 2016 without one single cedi from the central bank. In 2016, we did 0 central bank funding. This government has received 10 billion cedis from the central bank. They've also increased our debt by almost twice the total amount of all previous governments put together. And all of this notwithstanding, they have the least to show in terms of tangible gains or capital investments. It's all gone into consumption. Recently, I noticed a tweet. The good thing about social media is you should be very careful what you tweet or say, because it will come back years later to haunt you. I saw a relative of the president in 2016 had calculated how much I had added to the public debt. And he came to some 28 billion or something like that. And then he divided it by 30 million Ghanaians and said that I have caused every Ghanaian to owe 1,700 Ghana cedis. I don't know how many of you saw it. Just 2 days ago. So I took my pen and I did the same calculation. And his cousin, the president, has added 7,000 Ghana cedis debt to every Ghanaian. And so, I mean, it just shows you, you know, what you do when you do that kind of comparison. And so, just in 4 years, Ghanaians, you know, have had 7,000 Ghana cedis added. To put it in proper context even, by the time I left office, if you added the total public debt, then from Nkrumah till I left office, we had lumbered Ghanaians with a debt per capita of 4,000 Ghana cedis. And then in 4.5 years, his cousin has added 7,000 Ghana cedis to the 4,000. That puts it in even better perspective for you. So these are some of the things that we need to look at. Another major problem has been the unprecedented levels of corruption and total lack of accountability and prudence in the management of the public purse. According to the Auditor General, financial irregularities within the public sector shot up from 700 million Ghana cedis in 2016 to 12 billion cedis in 2020. Procurement infractions have become a major issue. Sole sourcing of everything has become the order of the day. And procurements, yeah, I was making this point. I remember, and Seth, you help me here. As part of GIFMIS, we had a contract management and procurement, you know, module as part of GIFMIS. I don't know what has happened to that model. Is it still active? It's been deactivated. It was meant to bring more transparency into procurement and contract management. And that was a very important aspect of GIFMIS that we had started to implement. Now, I don't think that module works. You know, everything has been abandoned. This level of leakage will definitely affect the ability of any government to deliver on its mandate and guarantee the citizens an appreciable standard of living. The nonchalance and total unwillingness to address corruption in government is a major worry and will continue to affect our economic fortunes until the trend stops. When I called for a change in government in 2024, when I said the 8 years has to happen in order that the government can be held accountable and that people don't walk away with their stolen monies, because it's obvious that this president has no will to tackle corruption. Anytime you attack him, they go back and go and resurrect cases from 2016. And I said before, I said the easiest, way of fighting corruption is to prosecute your political opponent. The true test of somebody who is willing to fight corruption is to investigate and prosecute your own. But it's clear that this president has no intention of investigating or prosecuting his own. And that's why the natural order of things that Ghanaians have established is that after 8 years, leave and let a new government come and hold you accountable. And so when I called for a change in government in 2024 as a first step towards halting this hemorrhage of badly needed resources through corruption and holding offending officials to account, our friends in government took offense. But it remains the only viable way to save and protect the public purse in the face of abundant evidence that nothing will be done by this president about the situation. Today we've heard a lot of numbers, and these numbers tell a story. We politicians like to recite numbers with aplomb, believing that they show our superior performance. Our people have often questioned the relevance and importance of these numbers by retorting that they do not reflect in their lives or their pockets. Anytime we talk about GDP growth and inflation going down and things, our people say, well, what's the purpose of all these figures when, life is still so bad for us? They are justified in demanding a correlation between the numbers that we boast about and improvements in their lives. To what extent have we been able to offer a tangible linkage between our talk about stable inflation and our people actually going to the market and finding that prices have remained the same over an extended period of time? No, prices have not remained the same over an extended period of time. Our people are just galled by the hypocrisy of so-called economic experts who in 2016 asked them to forget about economic statistics and look at the escalation of prices of cement and other products on the market. And then today, the same experts in government hold up statistics, including inflation, and say that life is better now for them and that the perception of hardship in Ghana is just a creation of Mahama. And yet when you go on the market, every day you see prices are changing. And they say, no, forget about that. Look at the statistics. Inflation is single digit, And yet the same people in the past said, forget about inflation being single digit. The reality is, look at how prices are changing on the market. This is the kind of hypocrisy that I say is laughable. And there's so many examples of them. When they point about forex rate relation with fundamentals, and then when the same forex thing happens, they say it doesn't necessarily mean that the fundamentals are weak. This is a conundrum for us all. And the question I ask is, how have we all ensured as leaders that when we have touted high economic numbers, it has found expression in the number of jobs that are created within the economy to guarantee our teeming youth a dignified existence within which they are able to meet their needs and those of their dependents? How has economic growth led to actual growth in the lives of our people? So it's not how fast the economy is growing. It is how that growth, is devolved into reflecting in the lives of our people. You can have countries with lower growth, but you find that development and growth of their people is much better. And so it's not just about touting high GDP growth. It is how it reflects on our people. We're at a juncture where these questions have become even more critical. Despondency, disillusionment, and frustration over unmet expectations and our collective inability over the years to translate economic numbers into tangible outcomes and improvements in the living conditions of our people are casting an ominous pall over the enthusiasm that greeted the democratic transition that took place decades ago. Our people are beginning to question whether this whole democratic effort is not only a ruse to guarantee access to the resources of a country to a privileged few elite, to do as they please with it and satisfy their creature comforts to the detriment of the masses who should be the ultimate beneficiaries. The much heralded democratic dividend is fast turning into a mirage far beyond the reach of the people for whom it was intended. There can be no denial of the fact that Ghana is caught in the throes of deep social and economic problems. Mounting unemployment, affecting millions of our young people, ever declining quality of education, problems with our healthcare and agriculture, decaying infrastructure, corruption, weakening and politicization of state institutions, insecurity, unreliable public services continue to make life very difficult for the average Ghanaian. The speed with which hundreds of thousands of young people spontaneously took over social media and demanded that this country be fixed is a cautionary tale on how exactly the people feel about the way this country is being governed. Rather than cynically scoffing at these calls and ascribing political motives to them, and pretending that the genuine cry for help from our citizens is a figment of the imagination of some political leaders, we should be lending a listening ear to these young people, and indeed to our people. The problems of our country and the solutions to them cannot be reduced to a handful of fancy slogans. And so when elections are coming, it's free SHS. Next election, Agenda 111. Our problems go beyond this sloganeering. We have problems in every sphere. And so when the young people say fix the country, they're not talking about sloganeering and a partial fix in one segment or an attempt to fix one segment. It's about looking at the lives of Ghanaians comprehensively and making their lives more meaningful. So the problems facing our country and the solutions to them cannot be reduced to a handful of fancy slogans and poorly conceived and implemented half measures aimed at obtaining short-lived political gratification, only to have them inflict deeper socioeconomic wounds on our country and leave more problems than they resolve. Governance is not about empty sloganeering and PR stunts. It should be about methodical steps that are well conceived and thought through to address our problems holistically and permanently. And it should be about carrying the bulk of our people along with the policies and programs that we come up with. It should be about crafting and rolling out a vision that transforms society in meaningful ways, which will clearly benefit all our people and not just a few. I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity and the platform to participate in this forum. And once again, I want to thank the organizers, Pro Forum. We're proud of you. The impression had been created that NDC was a bunch of riffraffs, and because of the tradition of veranda boys from the Nkrumah and UGCC era, it looks like we are seen to be the inheritors of the veranda boys, group, while the big lawyers who were the UGCC members were inside. We sat on the veranda. And so until Pro Forum came along, NDC had generally been considered to be a bunch of riffraffs. But I can say that with the members and the people that I see in Pro Forum, I know that pound for pound, we are not only academically, imbued with professionals and people who are pragmatic and practical in the way they resolve issues. And so, Proforum, thanks for a good job. And this is the first time I'm encountering Center for Ethical Governance and Administration. And I want to thank you too. And we hope that you continue to create these platforms so that we can share ideas. And I'm sure that it will be for the better of our country. Thank you very much, and God richly bless you.
I think we must do it better than this. I mean, we couldn't have had it. Now, yes, I'm saying. Now, thank you, former President, our flag bearer, for the 2020 election. And, well, I think we must go on straight to what we came here for. But I've been signaled that there's another important program for the flag bearer, the NDC flag bearer for 2020. So he might take leave of us. Am I getting it right? Yeah. Yes. But let me assure the flag bearer, John Dramani Mahama, that you have provoked us into having another lecture. And the next lecture will be on corruption at the School of Law, Ghana School of Law. And Proforum is going to have series of such lectures coming up to tell them that we are aware and we are the think tank for what Ghana ought to be in the future. I think at this stage, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, let them see off before. Those who have questions, I would like to see you by hand. And at the appropriate time, when we have to leave the stage for the president to make a move, I will announce that. So now I have the first hand. Dr. Kobe Mensah, you have a question for, is it for the presenter? Okay, please. Can we have the mic to hand over the mic to Dr. Kobe Mensah? I can see you here. How many more people? I can see Mensah Thompson of ASEPA. You are here. Okay, so can you line up here? Kobe Mensah, I can see you. Mensah Thompson, I can see you. How many hands? Yes, I can see. I don't know your name, but I want to get some more names. Okay, I see your hand. Blair of Joy FM, are you here? It's as if I'm picking my friends. I don't know you. I mean, it's just that you are the most. Please, let's be upstanding as we see of the flag bearer of the NDC. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. Thank you. Yeah. Then I can see some more hands. Can you line up? I can see Kobe Mensah, another Mensah Thompson. Mr. Blay, Joy FM, are you ready? I saw you. Can you join the queue? Okay, all right. Okay. Did I see Anthony of Nooks? The Secretary General, you are here. Can you join them? I'm happy you are here, Nooks. I'm happy. Very, very excited to have you here. And I think I saw Dr. Jerry Moffat. Did you raise your hand at the fifth person? Not yet. Not yet, okay. So I think we'll take the first four. We'll take the first four and see how it goes. We are not doing well with time, but I think we are pregnant with questions and answers to be ready for you. Can we have the mic, hand over the mic to Dr. Kobe Mensah, introduce yourself well. I know
Okay.
you, but I don't know.
All right, thank you. Thank you. My name is Kobe Mensah, University of Ghana Business School. And my question, please, is that first of all, let me commend the speaker for a fantastic insight. And of course, the evidence of your performance. I think no wonder you're part of the UGBS faculty. I think the insight was very, amazing. Now, for those of us who are less on the numbers and heavy on communication, I think I would like to ask, what are some of the other homegrown economic policies that were implemented during your time, aside the ESLA? I think I was very much into ESLA, and I'm sure most people really understood the issue of ESLA, etc. Of course, and the performance that you highlighted. I would rather like to know other homegrown economic policies aside ESLA. And then also, there is a saying that if it's not broken, you don't fix it. And I'm sure that's the reason why the current administration is continuing ESLA. Is there any other homegrown economic policies that you actually and your team came up with that the current administration is continuing, and those that they have discontinued? And if they have discontinued, what would you say are some of the reasons why they have actually discontinued? And my last question is that which homegrown economic policies has the current administration preferred in solving some of our problems, if you know? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mensah Thompson. I'm the Executive Director for SEPA. And I have two quick questions. The first one is that the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, has consistently attacked the economic records of the government which you were Finance Minister of. To be exact, he has blamed you and your team for mismanaging the economy, leading to the banking sector crisis. Your response to this claim during your presentation has been that there were ways which these banks could have been saved. Assuming you were the Finance Minister from 2017 to 2020, what would you have done, you and your government have done, to ensure that we save some of those banks, when it is on record that some of the banks who were giving liquidity support had misapplied them? The second question had to do with the fact that in your presentation, in fact, our economic indicators look quite scary. And one of the things that is becoming quite a challenge is the revenue side. Currently, government is seeking to invest about $1.2 billion to acquire shares in ACRE. One of the proponents of this transaction have argued that that this transaction had some revenue potential if it goes through that could help any subsequent government, assuming the investment goes on right. We have done some calculations, and if you look at the capital allowance of 1.2 billion which ACRE is seeking to sell to GMPC, after which GMPC is going to borrow another $700 million to invest as equity. If you do the calculation, and also if you look at the current oil prices and how much crude they are going to be getting from the various blocks, and in the next 15 years, if you look at how much we are getting, considering the net, the NPV of how much we'll be getting, do you think that this is the right way of spending $1.2 billion of taxpayers' money?
My name is Dominic Ofosu. I'm a student here in University of Ghana. Excuses is like running on a treadmill, and when you run on a treadmill, you can run 100 kilometers and you still be on the same spot. COVID-19 has become a highly exalted an anointed and a powerful excuse for our nation and other African nations. Why is the government not doing well? COVID. Why our classrooms and our campuses are empty? COVID. Why the media is not doing their best? COVID. Why is there so much traffic out there? COVID. I believe that COVID-19 should be an opportunity for us to thrive as a nation. The GDP, the debt management, the inflation, they are symptoms of the state of Ghana's economy. The root cause of the state of Ghana's economy is our mindset. I believe that if we will move forward as a nation, we need a mindset of no excuses. We need a mindset of humility, a mindset of no blame game, a mindset of patriotism, a mindset for love for the nation. Here comes my question. My question is on the scorecard. If our nation will score high in the marketplace, the young people must be empowered, they must be trained, they must be groomed, because the young people are the strikers. So what is the training? What is the plan the NDC and then that of the nation has for the youth of our nation? Because they are the strikers. We need to strike so that we can score high point. Thank you.
My name is Inyo Lochu, Ghanaian, let me put it that way. I have two main issues. The scorecard, I'm very much interested. We score MPP, we score NDC. You look at the difference, you see who have performed better. I believe that election is a process and governance is a process. So as we have discussed this scorecard, giving 2, 3, or 10, 4, whatever it is, what is our way forward? So although I came a little late, but I was expecting that based on this and this, these are some of the proposals of NDC for the way forward. So that at the end of the day, the listener will know that MPP did well in this way, but poorly in that way. NDC did very well in this way, slightly poor in this way, and the next NDC, these are the steps they are going to take. And this is going to be a superior solutions to the problem. And that will give us more education to the public in moving forward. One thing I've been so much interested in, about 20 to 30 years ago, when China economy, I'm not an economist, I've never studied economy in secondary school or in the university, though I'm a graduate. When America and Germany were closing down their factories, moving down to China, that because that is cheap labor. From my common sense, I said very soon China will become the superpower and will be richer than all those nations and will be forced to put their factories back to their various countries. And now, from the past president of US, it started happening. They are now forcing to let US companies move back to America. Now, no country in Europe is richer than China. So what are we doing? In our Ghanaian perspective, if you say job, 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 foreigners are taking over all our economy. The Ghanaians have become the laborers. So at the end of the day, what is left in the hands of the Ghanaian? Can you find a way to grow the economy with the Ghanaians so that the investors are the Ghanaians? One key thing, energy is one of the most expensive in the country. Yeah, thank you. I wish the ESLA of my proposal, the reason why I give that US and this thing is that ESLA is a very good policy, a very good act. But I'm proposing, if that ESLA, because from the policy I realize that it's supposed to be only 5 years, after that it cuts off. But if you can go beyond the 5 years, and then the revenue is used to acquire all the generation machineries, plants, and then float on the Ghana Stock Exchange, then by so doing, it's no more directly private sector, and therefore the energy levels in terms of rates will come down. Number 2, planting for food and jobs. I know in NDC policy too, there is this farmer service center which can give a more sustainable agriculture production in the country.
We are not hearing about how that thing can solve this problem. We are only listening about the planting for food and jobs and the Farmer Service Center, which is a superior program and shall make the country more sustainable, is less heard of. Let's think about it. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may, there's a lot of questions.
All right. Yeah. My name is Julius Kwame Anthony. I'm the General Secretary of the National Union of Ghana Students. My question is on the fact that, I mean, from your presentation so far, it's obvious what your position on the current state of borrowing is. And I want to ask that if the economy was in your hands, how would you have handled it without borrowing the way this government is doing, given the COVID-19 conditions that we are facing? And then secondly, I would want to ask how you propose we get out of this situation where all our revenue is being spent on just two items, i.e. wages and salaries and compensation, and then debt servicing. How do you propose, in your wisdom, that we get out of this kind of situation? Thank you very much.
Please, just before the answer, a cameraman left his lens here. Has anybody lost a lens here? I need one actually, but those cameramen, has anybody left their lenses here? It's yours. Please come for it. Yeah,
well, thank you very much.
How would I do this for you?
Thank you very much. We had several initiatives. We had several initiatives under the homegrown policy. It was a whole package, as His Excellency said. We actually used it to negotiate the IMF, program. And the strong element of it, the new element, was the structural side, the sector, the things I wanted to do in sectors. So the first part is, there are in some of the things I've said already. For example, how do you manage crisis? Because as it says, we've had bushfires, we've had, those days, drought. Bushfires came with drought. And those of you who remember, we always graphic. You watch the level of the Kosomo Dam, to see that's when power rationing and all those things started to come. So how do you manage crisis? And that's what I said. We use the stabilization fund in the PRMA measures. How do you stop issuing sovereign guarantees? Every loan that you take is a sovereign guarantee. Every loan you take is a sovereign guarantee. We had a principle of borrowing with a sovereign guarantee for social infrastructure, education, health. All commercial projects should pay for themselves, which is self-financing. Because that's the only way in which you can, those are some of the measures to limit, the borrowing. And let me tag it quickly to the other question. We are not saying that we are not going to borrow. If you recall, we had what we call the smart borrowing. Every country borrows. In fact, the U.S. is debating now how to borrow significantly, to repay from taxes for infrastructure. But it is in repaying the debt. We were not repaying our debt, and we were rolling over, and that's where the danger was. And that's where we set up the sinking fund, which, as we demonstrated, we used. So please look to our solutions that also had some success, right? It's not always just about the future, but we had, what I sought to demonstrate is that we had measures, and I showed how we use the stabilization fund to reduce, to borrow, to pay off the Kufuor bond. We were going to use it to pay off our own bonds, and others, because it was a structure that we're going to have in place. And it is that which will enable you, repay your loan. Your interest rates will then go down, and then you'll be able to borrow outside for external, projects, and not put pressure on the domestic market, where the interest rate is also high. Then on the real sector, some of the measures he certainly mentioned, two of them. Remember he mentioned the Chiabo. A Chiabo is part of the self-financing. And we said that unlike Nigeria and other countries, and this was a lesson we learned, we were not going to flare gas. So we laid the pipelines, that's the energy sector, to bring the gas, because after all, power had been a problem, to bring the gas onshore for us to turn the gas into power. This is a tangible, and so these were some of the measures, that we had in place, another major measure that we had was the Exim Bank. It was the NTC that established the Exim Bank. And the rationale behind the Exim Bank is that the Exim Bank will leverage domestic processing and others. We always spoke about agro-processing. It was a question of the money to export. So like cocoa borders for the cocoa farmers, Exim Bank was going to do for the other, non-traditional exports, so that they would aggregate, support the private sector, export, and then they would use the aggregated amount, to bring in equipment, raw materials, and the rest. Because after all, when you export, you earn forex. And that's exactly what China Exims, you mentioned the initiatives, the question that China took and whatever. It was through effective planning. CDB, Exim Bank, and all those things. So CDB is similar to the gift that we established. The Exim Bank is the same name, Exim Bank, and all those. So there were quite a number of measures, that we had in place. I cannot go through all of it. It was a whole package. Gift means how to manage contracts that are awarded, in order that you prevent the budget overrun, and all those things were part of it. Remember GRA, so those are a lot of, measures that we had, and we'll repackage them. The banking sector crisis. Actually, we did something. I'm not saying that, so it's erroneous. ESLA was the beginning. The audit that was done by the NDC, under the NDC of the banks. ESLA, and the model is what I think probably the questioner was not in when I explained. But the model followed the non-performing assets recovery trust. The alternative is to create a bad bank, where you put the non-performing loans in there. They will be managed over time. Meanwhile, use the ESLA to pay the depositors and the rest, so that, or their loans to the banks, so that the banks can be on their feet. And then you manage the malfeasance, the offenses and things, separately. They are complementary. Sometimes you sold assets as it's being done. And definitely some would have been liquidated, because some actually had liquidated. Most of the banks that were closed, some of them had, self-liquidated already. So those would. So we actually had that policy, and I think I explained it, earlier on. Maybe if you get access to later on to the presentation. ECA. This is a real energy sector issue, but let me link it to the capital allowance. A capital allowance means that there's an investment in assets. If it is linked to this aspect, which I had not actually, seen, argue. But then capital allowance is depreciation. That is the tax authority's equivalent of capital allowance. It's true that, but for you to get a capital allowance means that you would have invested. And the point being made is that those investments were being put on the external market at a lower price of 280 or something million. So why pay 1 point something billion? So it comes down to the same argument. Because capital allowance, if you want to sell it, it means that you are selling the right to an asset you would have invested. I think the business, school professors here, know that to get capital allowance, which is what the tax authorities call depreciation, means that you have invested and it's accelerated. Instead of, say, 10 years, they often accelerate it for you so that you can recover in about 5 years. So if there were investments, and those investments were being put on the capital markets at 250 or whatever million, and we had actually seeded some of it, those are the issues. So what is the value of the asset that is giving rise is, the question, which is at stake. Yeah. One of the misrepresentations for which I was accused was that we were not allowing young people to be recruited to the public service. There was a net freeze, policy and others, but let me just say that, it wasn't a policy of not recruiting at all. But in addition to the public service, recruitment, which often went beyond the capacity, of the institutions. And you notice that it's normally the ministries and departments. How many professors do you need in Legon? You do an establishment, you know it. So do we just add on, to lecturers, professors, and all that, right? So that's the question. it gets to a point where it's unsustainable. You can have them, you can recruit them, but they become what? Somewhat unproductive. Our equivalent was create jobs in the real sector. Create jobs in the real sector. The investments that we were doing, often we do not link them to, to employment. Take 50-year schools, which we were doing. Take the hospitals and the rest. How many laborers are appointed? How many architects are appointed there? Those are graduates, aren't they? How many accountants are appointed there? How many, if you take the cocoa roads, the resurfacing that we're doing the resurfacing of roads that we're doing every rainy season, those of us who have lived outside, isn't that the resurfacing of roads after the snow? And isn't that what generates jobs, every summer in the advanced countries? What's the difference between rain and snow? Rain washes, so you resurface. And if you put up a fund, you put up an asset fund, which is what the road fund was set up, to do, and for which part of ESRA was going to go into it, it means that road construction and road surfacing will be a constant and annual affair. It's not something which you have run short of budget resources. You are creating jobs there. How many engineers would you have recruited? How many? So real sector jobs are the most sustainable. It is not on account of, and part of this is politically incorrect to be saying some of these things, and I'm aware of it, right? But you cannot, put, let's say, for an establishment of 500, you recruit 1,000. Do you see a connection with the compensation that we are now using all the money? What if we had invested some of that in the real sector of the economy? The same young people will go to the real sector economy. And how many people will a contractor recruit? Is it only government that recruits? You can't do the same thing and expect, over and over, as they say, and expect different results. So you have to look at what others are doing. So if you started an infrastructure drive, like the railway, which is being constructed, for which we got a loan, the hospitals and the rest, I think what we have to do is to quantify the jobs that, are created there, right? And then have an agenda also, for making sure that you sustain it. It's about sustaining it because it's capital intensive. And that's why we were keen on setting up the infrastructure fund, Ghana Investment, GIF, and all those other, things. The scorecard, yes, we would, they are underlying. I think some of the questions came from those who were not, in the early parts of the discussion. Let me repeat. We had a smart borrowing. We didn't say we're not going to borrow. It's our friends who said we're not going to borrow, right? We had the money. We had worked Bank of Ghana and everything. Those rhetorics that, we had smart borrowing. And smart borrowing means when you borrow, learn to repay. So that you can go to the capital markets to borrow. We reduced the rate of borrowing, but we did a lot of infrastructure at the same time.
Thank you very much. I think we've sat for long. I mean, we've done 3 hours already. And so, please, we will reserve the rest of the questions. Maybe you might see Mr. Stekwe personally after the program. Right. So, as a chairman, I think I have picked a few things here which I believe I must share to cap the entire program. We've heard about the fiscal, space, what is happening there as far as our revenue is concerned, as far as our expenditure is concerned, and then the gap between the expenditure and then the revenue that we generated. And you could see that it is not enough. And going forward, obviously, we should know where the country is heading towards. And building up on that, on the expenditure side, he talks about our debt levels, and you could see the debt level growing with the interest payment, where our revenue generation pays for salaries and interest payment, and everything is frozen. Now we have to look elsewhere for financial support. But then also looking at the revenue side, he highlighted on the petroleum revenue, for which the various percentages that are supposed to go into the various sectors of the economy
are also highlighted. But clearly, I have learned from this presentation that until we rationalize our expenditure and then find other avenues of generating more, I don't think we can come out from this quagmire. And so I believe that 2024, whoever takes the mantle of this country, that should be the position, not to spend into areas without prioritization. Thank you very much for your time. We hope to see you next time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Sorry for those who got up to ask questions. We booked this room for a period of time. We have actually exceeded that. So, as the chairman said, you can see, Mr. Setepe, with your questions, or if the questions are for John Dramani Mahama, I don't know where we will find him, but if you write your questions, we'll direct that to you. I have his speech. So those who will be interested, please, you can contact me and I'll send his speech to you. Maybe when you read it, you have further questions for him when he comes by in 2024. On this note, I'll call Dr. Nanama Brankluchi to give the vote of thanks. And I think that, and after that, Eric, are you here? Mamifwa? Is there anything for item number 13? Yeah, so after that, I think you tell us what we should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. And the chairman had said thank you to all of us, so I thought my task was done. But thanks for this opportunity. In our training, we will usually thank God for making this program possible and also a success. The time to speak is actually now. So on behalf of Pro Forum, we will thank the main speaker, Honorable Setepe, for this lecture, I would say, that we have had. He's given us what we need to know, the truth about the economy and the economy or the scorecard signing the reverse of the economy after the 2016, and also the astronomical borrowing of this government. Professor Lord Mensah, we say thank you for accepting to chair this program and also for your contribution. I think it's complimentary. His Excellency John Dramani Mahama has left us, but he needs to be thanked for honoring our invitation and for the deep remarks he had also given us. Our Professor Nana Jane Opokwajiman is a member of the Pro Forum. She has always supported us, and her support has always been invaluable. For all those who have supported this program and Pro Forum, there are many unseen faces, like Mamifwa and Eric, who have made this program also a success. We thank them. Even those who have challenged the Pro Forum, we are also grateful to them because they make Pro Forum, in fact, they motivate Pro Forum and make us even want to do more. We thank the members of the national executives of the NDC, Greater Accra Regional Executives, Ayawaso Constituency Executives, Legon Branch Executives, the 10, and then the progressive intellectuals. We thank you all for your support. Now, the Center for Ethical Governance and Administration, we are grateful to you and to all the members of the Professional Forum. The scorecard has been delivered. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dismiss. We are done. Thank you very much. And until we meet again, Dr. Tony Obin. Yes. Yeah, thank you.
essentially, reported